Hello, are we live?
Just about.
Okay.
Saying that showing live on Facebook.
We are now.
I'm
It says it is.
All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We are now live. This is very exciting.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're live. I can see it.
So,
live. I see us.
oh, fantastic. So all of us, the four of us, let's make sure our computer and phone volumes are down so that there's no feedback. And I want to welcome our special guest of honor, Aphrodite Jones, the author of Michael Jackson Conspiracy. We had a few technical difficulties, so anyone who's joining, thank you for hanging in there. I just want to take the time to tell you a little bit about our guest. We were so thrilled when Aphrodite said yes to doing this live call. She has never done this before, and we want to commend her for her bravery because the live format it's exciting. But you probably all know Aphrodite from her show True Crime, which has been airing on Investigation Discovery for the last 6 seasons. She's also an investigative reporter on Fox. She's commented on the trials of many high-profile celebrities such as O.J. Simpson, Kobe Bryant, Scott Peterson, Robert Blake, and of course, Michael Jackson. And we're so thrilled to have her here today. You may have read her book when it came out initially back in 2007. She had an updated edition in 2009, and she now has a new book with a new beautiful artwork, a new cover that's available, and it'll be on sale for the next 5 days. We'll be running countdown sales on the book, so if you don't have it, there's no excuse. It'll be on sale for 24 hours for 99 cents, less than $1, and you'll also be able to get, and that's the Kindle ebook version, and you'll also be able to get the soft cover book for just $9.99, and she's pretty much giving these away, so it's time to get the book if you haven't. I have the 2009 version, and I learned so much. I'm not someone who knows about like court stuff, but she finds a way to break it down in a way that you can understand, and it's all highlighted, and I have bookmarks and all kinds of things in it, but I think you really need to give it a try. So we actually have a few questions prepared for Aphrodite, and Jeanette, if you want to go ahead and take it away for us.
Thanks, Steph. And on top of all your work as a journalist, you're also a true crime writer, and you've written lots of different books. Could you tell us about why that genre interested you, and what was your motivation for that genre? How did it develop? Was it how the justice system works, or was it criminal psychology? What is it about true crime?
It's funny because when I started in true crime, I was considered a vulture and an odd person. And people used to say to me, this is 30 years ago, why do you like this? Why do you like murder and people killing each other and all this horrible stuff that goes on? I said, I don't like it, but it has something that I fell into. I call it a calling. I lost my parents when I was young, and I understand the idea of sudden loss. They both had heart attacks, so it was like a surprise, a shock, and it led me down a path into fighting for justice for somebody who had been killed by an FBI agent. So I guess the answer to your question is it was about justice from the beginning.
That's your first book, The FBI Killer? Is that 1992?
Yes, way back in time. And but that woman was considered a nobody by the FBI, and I dedicated the book to her because she wasn't nobody's a nobody, and she counted. And I was so hyped up about the fact that the Federal Bureau of Investigation did not care, and we're going to let that slide, that I had to tell that story, and I did, having no idea that this would become my calling or my career, but here we are.
Thank you. That's really interesting for someone who I haven't really read into that genre at all, and like Steph said, I'm not kind of versed in kind of jargon of courtrooms. So reading conspiracy is kind of my only experience of that genre. So to understand where your perspective's coming from is really interesting. That it's about the kind of voice for the voiceless.
Correct.
That's inspiring. And zooming forward then to Michael Jackson and the 2005 trial. In the book, you thank you thank somebody for getting you a place in the room. And was that because, were you going to be an author? Were you planning on writing the book, or were you there to do the journalist side? How were you there to begin with?
So I was there to begin with as an author, and
Right.
it was my intention to write that book at the time.
Right.
But I also was asked by Fox News to cover it for them. So it was a strange situation at first, because I actually had to stand in line with all the fans in the mornings. I used to have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and get there by 5 so that I could actually get a seat. So I wasn't allowed in with the regular media for the first month or so of the trial. It was really trying for me. And I was, yes, I was an author, but yes, I was also now covering it for Fox News, Bill O'Reilly, and they weren't giving me a seat. So finally, the pool coordinator, the pool coordinator is the person that handles the one camera that everybody has to use when Michael would come in and out, and he didn't.
Right.
And so he finally realized and, took mercy on me, because here I am waking up at 4:30 in the morning and standing in line with fans, because it was an auction every day. It was a lottery every day. And so I thanked him, because, at the end of the day, I was going to write this book. I thought I was going to write a book that was going to be talking about Michael Jackson being guilty, though, when I first started. So
well, that's what my next question was going to be. What sort of book did you think you were going to be writing?
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
As a person who is a huge Michael Jackson fan, and I grew up with Michael and love his music. I mean, I will always love his music, his dance, the genius. I could watch This Is It for, over and over and have. But I was very persuaded by the media's perception and constant harangue of Michael being around young boys, Michael being accused, the Jordy Chandler accusations, the Jordy Chandler settlement, all of those things, kind of piled up in my mind. And I was one of the regular media there all of the media there, pretty much, I think except for the people from Japan, had already decided he was guilty. Very few people in the media pool who thought, oh, this is, he's going to get exonerated. That was never a thought.
Yeah. I think in like looking back now from 2009, leaving Neverland, 2005, you can see why kind of a lie can spread and become more convincing each time. So yeah, I can imagine in 2005, and I was a fan then, it was a horrible day when we heard that Neverland had been raided in 2003, because all of that anguish about 93 come flooding back for the fan community as well. But that must have been strange for you, standing in line with fans who were obviously there. They were there to support Michael. You were there thinking, I'm writing a book about this guy being guilty. But so it's crazy, really, isn't it? It's a story of our times that you can have people in a queue and they've all had a journey with, growing up with Michael Jackson, and depending on, kind of the circumstances where they are at that time in that queue.
It was unusual. And what happened, though, was that the fans kind of got wind of what I was about, who I was. And once they saw me on Fox News, which at that time wasn't so political, Bill O'Reilly the show wasn't as political, the times weren't as political, and the coverage was really about the trial. But the fans decided that I was another Diane Jackson. And I used to get screamed at and howled at once I was no longer in those lines waiting to get in. I mean, they wanted to stone me. And
you mean Diane Diamond?
Sorry?
Did you mean Diane Diamond, or is there another Diane Jackson?
Oh,
right.
Diane Diamond. The fans thought that I was somehow equal to Diane Diamond in my zest to go after Michael, and that wasn't the case. I just thought, having been subjected to so much media and having been fed a story for so long, that I assumed he's guilty, but I didn't have like an axe to grind. I didn't have I wasn't there on a mission. I still wanted to tell the full story.
So Diane Diamond, Nancy Grace, Maureen Orth, Court TV, Abrams Report, they were just nasty, and they were like fixated on destroying his reputation and seemed to relish in reporting the negative news. So why do you think that is? Why was there such a lynch mob mentality against Michael Jackson? Like, you're going in there thinking he's guilty because of everything you've heard all these years, even though this is 12 years later now, since the first allegations that it never went to court, and there's this reporting and always about the boys. So why is that? Why is it that they were so fixated on him and it was all about the negative reporting?
I'll tell you why, Tammy. It's because this would have been a billion-dollar cottage industry if Michael Jackson went to prison. And Diane Diamond made a deal with Tom Sneddon, and I know this, to be the first in that jail when he was being held there. If you recall, on Pajama Day, I don't know if you know this, Pajama Day, the judge ordered Jackson to be back, and if Michael didn't make it back by the exact moment, he was going to put him in jail that day. So, the judge, and I interviewed Judge Melville, he was anxious to put Michael away. After the fact, I learned that not through his interview, but through being able to read through the lines. That judge would never say it, but he was certainly biased. Again, think about this. If he was in jail, right? Every day he was already on the cover of tabloid magazines around the world. Every day he was in tabloid news around the world. Now we would have Michael's on suicide watch. His children went to see him. Janet Jackson went to see him. Debbie Rowe went to see him. Oh, they're having a fight with this and that. Can you imagine? It would be an everyday story.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Since the 2003 documentary with Martin Bashir, and why these charges were actually even laid, because of their suspicions from Michael holding hands with Gavin Arvizo. But in fact, in court, it came out that Martin Bashir is the one who recommended that Michael have these kids at his Neverland ranch, and that he had Gavin Arvizo there and recommended or suggested they hold hands and that sort of thing. So he was already, you can see that even for this documentary, he was already, slanted in a direction that was not going to be good. I didn't know this at the time, but once I read your book and some of the court documents, it's like, wow, it was totally just led to, so that the public to see him in that way.
Martin Bashir, him sitting down with Martin Bashir and allowing Bashir to follow him around for almost a year, with no pay, by the way, just free and easy, was the biggest mistake Michael ever made.
Absolutely.
Martin Bashir wanted to make a name for himself by going after Michael Jackson, and he did it in the most devious way, by pretending that he was going to cover Michael, who wanted to create an international children's holiday. And we think about children being privileged, but the truth is that many children around the world are not privileged. They starve and they suffer. And he wanted to do that. And this was the auspices under which Michael decided to work with Bashir. And Bashir never intended to do that. You only see it in the outtake footage. He didn't include that in the documentary that aired.
Yeah, and that led to his arrest, and going to court. That documentary is a direct result of that. Yeah.
1,000%. It was the first piece of evidence. It was the first thing when the trial began, Bashir was the first witness called on the stand, and that documentary, the outtakes and all, was played for 2.5 hours. That's how we were introduced to this trial, and that was the prosecutor, what he used is the fact that Michael said that he and Gavin held hands and slept together in the bed. The truth is, Bashir directed Michael to bring the Arvizos there. Michael hadn't seen the Arvizos in years, okay? He directed that. He directed them to hold hands. And then while they were holding hands, he brought up that question about sleeping in the bed. And what is Jackson going to do? Now the tape is running and the kids are there.
And Snedden's going like, oh yes, you know, once he saw that, and it's obvious that he had a vendetta against him. And even to bring these charges with the evidence they had, there was no evidence as far as
totally no evidence. And then people don't really realize that, which I can't, it's hard for me to fathom that the average person who is perhaps knows Michael's music, but has made up their mind long ago that he's guilty. They're not even open to seeing the truth about what happened here.
right.
It was a witch hunt.
And
Right.
you know, and since you mentioned the outtakes of Martin Bashir's documentary, I think the best part of your book to me was the way in which you described Michael's facial expressions throughout all of these different things that were presented, all of these different witnesses and materials. And you described the jury's reaction to the Martin Bashir outtakes and how they were moved by it, you know, and some of them were crying. And I wonder, could you give us a little bit more detail on what you learned about Michael through watching his reactions to the jury, to the other people in the courtroom, the witnesses? I mean, I can't even imagine what he would have been going through at that point, but you captured it so well in the book.
Well, thank you. I tried to do that. I mean, you know, it was very special to be able to be around Michael Jackson for that length of time. The trial went on for 5 months. You know, and every day there I am with him walking into court. I mean, it was strange, really strange. And I did sit in a place where I was able to see him. You know, I was off to his left. He would have his family, his parents sat directly behind him. And, you know, he'd be at the defense table, obviously, but I could see him, and it was like he was watching This Is Your Life, as if his whole life was going by him at once. And you were seeing people that worked for Michael that suddenly came in with different stories, or managers, or Debbie Rowe, who tried to like beg Michael from the stand to forgive her. It was a very strange moment there. But he watched with, I would say, a stoic face for the most part, but there were moments where you realized he was horrified by the lies he was seeing, and by the garbage that was coming out of these people's mouths. I mean, you could see that he was double-crossed, and that certain people in particular that he helped so much double-crossed him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And some of those, like, sorry, just like the people that came out that he was horrified about, Adrian McManus and you know, Ralph Chacon. Adrian McManus in 1993 had a deposition saying she never saw anything happen. It was great in 1993 until Neverland 5 sold their stories, and then her story changed in 1994 when she filed a lawsuit against him. So these are the witnesses that were not credible, that were, you know, were found they were liars. That were allowed in to testify. And so I can't imagine how he would have felt. Like the fact that this was even allowed is just astounding, like in the court system, that these are, you know,
Well,
stories.
It was very convenient for people to say whatever they wanted to say, because if Michael had been found guilty, then they could have gone back and renewed their, come up with a different allegation, something that he you know, had done to them so they could get money out of him. And the irony of it all was that when we sat and listened to everybody's testimony, it turned out those 5 people you're talking about, actually, they were accused and were found guilty of stealing things from Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, they were the thieves. They were the ones who were trying to
report that. The media didn't report that. He sued them.
Yeah, he sued them, and he won. Michael won. But no, nobody wanted to report that. People only wanted to report all of these negative stories that were lies that came out of Michael Jackson's help.
Yeah, I think some of the testimony from the witnesses that you described, everything from Dana Arvizo's wild testimony. I mean, she was another one that was, you know, making eye contact with Michael. I think that was the craziest part to me. The people who either purposefully avoided looking at him altogether versus the people who like really tried to appeal to him. Debbie, Janet, even George Lopez you mentioned, and I didn't know that much about George Lopez before this book, and his involvement with everything. But he tried to, like, you know, kind of give him a little look at the end, and Michael was just not having it. The airline hostess, everything, it was just amazing, and
Well,
I can't imagine.
You have to realize too, Michael, the first day that the trial started, I was there. I was let in, and he didn't get there until almost 8 o'clock. And I was in the first position. The Fox and the CNN had the first positions as his motorcade pulled up. And the one thing that impressed me so much, and I'll never forget, is that it was Michael by himself in his own SUV sitting there. He didn't have, everybody else was in different cars. And I just looked at him, and I could see him through the windshield. He was sitting there. He waited, for somebody to come around from a different car with the umbrella and all of that, and his lawyer, Mesro, to join him. And to me, he was the loneliest soul on earth at that time. In other words, he knew, and in advance through your lawyers what the discovery is going to be. He knew he was going to be smeared by half of the people in his life, if not more. He knew it. And here he was sitting alone in that SUV. I'll never forget his face. And I wanted to cry, because no matter how many people you think love Michael, he was alone there, and he was facing what could have been something that would have killed him if you'd been put in prison. I don't think he was too delicate and frail to have tolerated prison. I don't think he would have made it.
Even Tom Mesro said that he probably would have died if he had been sent to prison. And well, it's interesting that you got such a firsthand experience just being there, but even more interesting is the fact that you did have a bit of interaction with Michael face to face. I think you saw him in a corridor or a hallway, and you even got to ask him a question, didn't you?
Well, so every day the media would be in a pen, and as he would leave, we could ask questions. And my question was, what do you think of your fans? Because there were so many people from all over the world. And he had stopped answering questions at that point. Mm-hmm. He was walking by the media who were roped away. He was done with it because he realized that there was nothing fair going to happen. But when I asked him that question, he quickly turned around and said, I love my fans. I love my fans. And it was like, I gave him the opportunity to say something positive, because I was sick of what the media was doing, even though at that point I didn't realize I was kind of maybe subconsciously moving over. Mm-hmm. I just was sick of it. I was like, these people are relentless. And, what about all his thousands of fans, millions of fans everywhere who had now come, and thousands had come to those gates of that courthouse from all over the world. So, and then the other thing you're talking, those were two different incidents. The other thing was that I was one of the last people let into the courtroom the day of the verdict. And because of that, I wound up going into the metal machine right as Michael was going through, because he used to be always was the last person to come in through the metal detector. And he was standing there waiting to go into the metal detector, and so was I. And I'm looking at him, and I'm suddenly realizing, oh my, and he goes, hi, like he's been looking at me every day for months. And I was like, hi. And then I was like, oh my God, he's so cute. And, I love Michael. And, all of a sudden my mind starts going into fan mode. I'm like starstruck. I'm like, oh my God, maybe he likes me. Maybe he'll like me. Maybe he'll ask me out. Who knows? He knows who I am. It was crazy.
You're there you're there first as a journalist, and you're an author, and you're thinking he's guilty, and then you see him in person, and your thoughts go there. That's kind of interesting.
Well, I was literally next to him. I wasn't seeing him. I was seeing him every day, but now I'm standing we're together.
Yes.
That's what happened.
Yeah, sure. So he had something about him, obviously, or
the aura of
you got to know him during the trial, or whatever, through his testimony, and got to know what he's like.
I got to know him when I watched I transcribed the Martin Bashir video, the whole thing, for my book. I transcribed it myself. So everything that Michael said during it, those are things that stay with me for the rest of my life. I always remember him, a couple of things. One of them was, he said he used to hide in the bushes in the house in Encino, because he didn't want to go out on tour. And he would be so scared and not want to go when he was in his tween years, and he had pimples on his face and he felt awkward, and he would literally hide from his father. that was one of the things that always stuck with me. The other thing was that he grew up, he said, in strip clubs, performing in strip clubs at the age of 5 and on with his brothers. And then they'd come on and they'd throw money on the stage, coins at him for his performance. And he said that's all he knew, was to wind up going back afterward and being with his brothers and his father all in one hotel room when he wasn't known yet. And sometimes what was happening was that boys were bringing people home and women home, and Michael was there and he was seeing it. And, how confusing does that have to be for a 5-year-old to realize they're the one that basically is getting the accolades, and yet everybody else is doing whatever they want to do, while his mother at home is a strict Jehovah's Witness, and he's 5 and 6 years old. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
so all of that reading and everything that you were learning about him, and then you come face to face with his aura by the metal detector, and I suppose that's what's really interesting, that the verdict still surprised you. Emotionally, you were understanding Michael, you getting to know him, but the kind of facts of the case were lost in the kind of craziness of the media and the courtroom and all the hype at the time.
That's a really insightful comment, Jeanette, because that's exactly what was happening. And, I used to say, I saw it, the blinders came off when the verdict happened, but now I have all this time to reflect 15 years later, and I realized I was seeing something. There's a reason I was so enthralled with Michael. There's a reason why I wanted to ask him about his fans and get away from the negativity. And I remember there was one time, and I'm on with Bill O'Reilly, and I said, Michael Jackson is bigger than Elvis Presley. And O'Reilly poo-pooed it and said to me, please, you can't compare Michael Jackson to Elvis Presley, the king of pop, the king of rock, whatever he's called. And I was like, are you kidding? I answered him. I said, yes, I can. But he was, by many in the mainstream media, they didn't understand the power of Michael Jackson. They thought he was this cartoon character, and that's what they wanted to portray. So, I think, I think looking back all these years later, with hindsight being 2020, I was in his corner. I was trying to say positive things, trying to get out that our visas were liars, and Fox News was controlling what I was able to say. That happened. That really did happen.
It's no wonder that Michael stopped doing interviews during the trial. The way that they would spin things, especially Pajama Day that you described so clearly in the book. He came to court in his pajamas, and everyone spun it as this whole publicity stunt where the reality was the jury hadn't even seen him. They could only see him from his waist up. They didn't even know he was wearing pajamas, but it was all over the news that day. And I just want, for people who haven't read the book, Aphrodite, could you just paint a picture of the surrealness of being in that environment during that time? I vaguely remember something that you wrote in the book about E! News Entertainment doing these like crazy theatrical reenactments of the trial. What was that? What? I couldn't believe that.
E! News wanted me to cover that for them as well on the side.
It's bizarre.
And E! News wanted me to do commentary about the actors who are portraying the trial at the time of the trial. And I was just like, I'm not going to participate in that craziness. No. But
that's the kind of thing that was happening. That's how.
Okay, Pajama Day. Let me just get this clarified. That was the day that Gavin Arvizo was slated to testify, and Michael had gone to a hospital. We now know, he was never really off of his whatever medications. It was clear that he was medicated throughout the trial, although Mesro would never admit to that, but you could tell that he was subdued, okay? Even though he had his reactions and stuff, he had, he was floating through. But then maybe not every day. That day, he had gone to a hospital. That day, whatever reason, I think he just couldn't stand the fact that this kid who he helped through blood drives and everything else was now going to stand and take the stand and lie to the world about being molested. I don't think he could stand it.
But he also fell. Didn't he fall that day? That's what they said, was that he fell. He was in the hospital in pain, and that's why he was.
He may have said that, but I don't think that was the real reason. Again, with hindsight, I think the real reason that he went was because he was so beside himself, because he helped that kid, Gavin Arvizo. He held blood drives for that kid. He did everything for that kid.
Mm-hmm.
And now he was going to come in and testify and lie. And I think Michael just couldn't stand the idea. And he was at the hospital for whatever reason, whether he fell, whether he was upset, whatever. And when the judge found out that he was going to be late, that's when the judge ordered, if he does not appear by the time that the court starts, which is 8:30, if he does not appear, he will be put in jail.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to be swooped up by his people. Okay, they drove at 90 miles an hour. We knew that. We were tracking him through a helicopter. And so when he got there, he had been wearing his pajamas. He just put on a jacket and they shoved him out the car, because if he hadn't walked in the court on time, Melville was going to put him in jail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't think anybody even realizes that. It wasn't like Michael wanted to wear his pajamas. Michael was very into his looks and his appearance, and he was very respectful of the court the whole time. And no.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know if I correctly described that in the book. I'm not sure. It's been so long since I wrote it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for him to have to be some, I don't know, to me, it's like, I can imagine needing a lorazepam or something maybe during those times like that. That must, you physically saw him deteriorate, and that, you know, and in your book you describe just shaking his head and just like, wow, can't even believe this is coming out of their mouth. So yeah, I can understand that. But
yeah, and you know, Tom Mesereau told me many times, I don't think I included it in the book, but Michael called him every night in the middle of the night crying, like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, crying because he couldn't understand why this was even happening, because there was no truth to it. There was no truth to it. And he couldn't bear the constant barrage of people that were coming up and telling stories about his life that just, they weren't true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. What if that was you?
Oh, I can't imagine. Nobody else had to endure that, but Michael Jackson was an easy target, I think, because they, like you say, he was a caricature to people.
Yeah. And he said that in his outtake footage. He said, you know, I'm a flesh and blood person. You know, you can't, people treat me like I'm not a person. I'm a person. And, you know, why do people think that they can just, you know, say whatever they want about me? Don't they realize I have feelings? And it really stuck with me, what the things he said off camera to Bashir.
And also, going back to Pajama Day, the devastation for Michael would have been with Gavin Arvizo's testimony, because one of the cornerstones of his philosophy was the innocence of children. And, you know, we all know that quote when he got told by a child after he did the moonwalk for the first time, "Man, you're great." And he said, "That's the first time I was happy with my performance, because I know children don't lie." We've all heard him say that on Oprah Winfrey, and we know what he thinks about children. So for one of those children, you know, a very vulnerable boy when he knew him, in a wheelchair, you know, bald head, to lie on the stand must have just tore his heart out. And it must have been a kind of, you know, like a mark in Michael's own philosophy about what children are capable of, because he was so idealistic before that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we didn't.
Go ahead, Steph.
Well, I was going to say that would be something to hear from Bill Whitefield, the bodyguard, because he had lots of conversations with Michael in the last 4 years, to see if he, you know, heard anything from Michael about how his perception of children or whatever changed after that, maybe become less naive, more realistic about what, you know, especially teenagers can be capable of if they're influenced by the wrong sorts of people.
And of course, it wasn't only Gavin who was lying. He was fortified by the lies of Star Arvizo's brother, and as you said, the sister, Davlin. Yeah, and the truth is that all three of them not only lied on the stand here, but they at the trial, but they lied previously in a lawsuit against Sears or J.C. Penney's rather, and they claimed that their mother was molested by J.C. Penney's guards. I mean, the, how come nobody saw this correlation during the trial in the media? No one reported it at all.
No. Well, that's coming on to my next question is, what was your impression of the Arvisos after you listened to all of their testimony, or did it take the reading of the transcripts after for you to fully form your viewpoint on them?
No, I had a viewpoint on them from not the kids so much. I wasn't sure at first, because we had been seeing the rebuttal video that they made over and over again throughout the trial. Anytime there was an opportunity for the defense, for Mesereau to play that, to show the jury that these people who are claiming Michael molested the kid, we're all thanking Michael. We're loving Michael. We're saying, calling him Daddy Michael. We're saying he's the only one who really cared about us. He's the one who did all this for us. So we would see it over and over again throughout the trial. Well, by the time Janet Arvizo actually became a witness and came into the courtroom live, she looked completely different. She was this pretty woman in the video, and she comes in, she's heavy. She's wearing this big pink sweatshirt outfit, sweatpants outfit that was horrifying. She looked like white trash. I hate to say it. I think they're Latino. I don't even know. I just know that it was like, who is this lady? This can't be Janet Arvizo, can it? So the minute she walked in, you started to think, what was she after? What was she after? And everything she said was in direct negation of all that she recorded for the purposes of Michael to fight the Bashir documentary. So yeah, I'm thinking she's a liar. I didn't believe her. I didn't believe her. She was a gold digger. You knew it because of what she did with J.C. Penney's. You knew it because she took money from George Lopez and Chris Tucker and everybody else. So no, she was a gold digger. It was the kids I was concerned about, whether or not something was real there. And at the end of it all, even with their testimony, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I believe everything they're saying. It didn't make sense to me.
I think in the book you describe the reaction to Starr's testimony as a collective cringe. I think that's the term you use, collective cringe.
You know what really made me cringe? When I looked at that evidence and the guest book for Neverland Ranch, which is this big black leather-bound book, beautiful book, okay, that he had. And people had signed it, Jessica Simpson and Tommy Hilfiger and Marlon Brando and all kinds of, superstars had signed this book, Liz Taylor. And here comes Starr Arvizo. And do you know what he did? He scratched his name into the emblem in the front of the book. Like there's a silver emblem saying Neverland Valley Ranch. He scratched it out of the leather. He defaced it. He destroyed it. That's the kind of stuff they were doing to all of Michael's stuff. They were destroying whatever property they wanted to while they were at Neverland.
Yeah. That tells you a lot about somebody's mentality if they're a guest and they're graffiti in the guest book on the front cover. It does, doesn't it?
Well, one of the maids was one of the cleaning ladies at Neverland, was a witness as well to the rooms were trashed, and just everything about that family was, they were wanting more from him and just, other people, and they had no qualms about doing that, just trying to get more from him. And
his mother claimed they were being held there. Michael was being held on a conspiracy charge of holding these people against their will. Yet Janet Arvizo was using Michael's limos and Rolls Royces to be driven back to Los Angeles, to be driven to the closest town called Solvang and get full body waxes. What was that about? People are looking at each other in the court going, what is this wacko? But yet nobody reported that during the trial.
Right, and just to be so that your people understand who haven't seen the trial or haven't read the book. So they're alleging that nothing happened till after the rebuttal video. The rebuttal video was praising Michael, and so they're trying to say that the alleged molestation occurred after, when the Child and Family Services are investigating him, and he's being scrutinized because of this documentary. And that's why they had to, I think in your book it says that initially they went to a civil attorney to sue Martin Bashir. It wasn't even about Michael Jackson until he was referred to Feldman.
Well, I don't know that they were going to sue Martin Bashir. They wanted to go after Michael Jackson for his money. You have to remember or understand that at the time when this documentary came out, they were being contacted by everyone in the world: CBS, ABC, NBC, Barbara Walters, the head of this network, that network, networks all over the world. Okay, the biggest news people in the world. It was Michael Jackson, and everybody wanted that interview. And 60 Minutes actually came on Neverland ground and started to interview the Arvizos, or Michael rather. It was Ed Bradley interviewing Michael, and the Arvizos got wind of it, and they realized as they're being bombarded by everyone, National Enquirer, this and that, with money offers to talk, that, you know what, we're not going to talk. We're going to go right to Jordy Chandler's lawyer, Larry Feldman, and we're going to find out whether or not he's going to represent us so we can get $25 million too.
Right. Your book, but in your book, it says that they were referred by the initial lawyer to Larry Feldman.
It could be. I mean, I just remember what was so heinous to me was that if this kid had been molested, you're going to make a video that says they were the best thing in the world. And if this kid had been molested, why would you go back to Neverland and spend all that time with Michael? And no, it just, nothing washed. And you didn't go to the police. You didn't go to child services. You went to a lawyer so you could sue him civilly. There's just, these people are lowlifes. I don't know how else to say it. The lowlifes.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the jury took that away from the defense when they went off to deliberate? Do you think those were the key things that they actually saw that the media did not see? I think the really key thing, and I know because I interviewed the jury foreman and other members of the jury as well, is that they looked at that police video interview tape, a copy of which I have, and in part, and I can tell I've studied it many times, and that kid was being coached by the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office. He was looking away from them. He was looking down, and there are people who will say, "Oh, well, if a kid's making, giving you information about alleged molestation, they would be shy and this and that." But he wasn't shy. He was lying. He was lying. He was being coached. He claimed he didn't know what ejaculation was. He's 13 or whatever years old. He was just lying. Mm-hmm. And that's what the jury saw. That's what convinced them at the end of the day. That was it. That police interview. Mm-hmm. Was it true that one of the jurors saw that Gavin smirked at one point in the videotape, and so she got it replayed for the other jurors to see the same, to notice that? Yes. I mean, that's what the jury foreman told me. I was not in the room, but that's what I was told. I have to believe them. Yeah. Okay.
So you go into the 2005 trial with the preconceived idea he's guilty because of all this negative media, and you learned throughout the trial, you saw the Arvizos, you don't find them credible. So what was it that made you decide that, something's off? And what was it about Michael that, getting to know him through either the outtakes or him as a person reacting to other people around him, what was it that made you want to investigate further and maybe write a book about this?
What it was as soon as the trial was over, I went up to the gates of Neverland, and I had already realized that, oh my God, this suddenly, you know what it was? I saw the Seddon and his team celebrating before the verdict. I happened to be at the restaurant they were at. Everybody else in the media was having a party, but I had visitors that night, and I was at a different restaurant way far away from town, and I saw the prosecution team, and they were celebrating. And I thought, you're celebrating, you're thrilled, you don't even know what the jury's going to say. And I guess now, as I say, looking back, I realized this was all hitting me in time at the time that I didn't realize it. So when the verdict came in, instead of being as shocked as these other people, I all of a sudden had the blinders taken off completely. I was like, no wonder, these guys are celebrating. And they also told me, because I talked to them, I talked to Zonin that night and Auchincloss. And they were like, yeah, we feel good, blah, blah. And one of the sheriffs said to me, even if we don't win, we have another goal in mind. And I'll never forget that, because to me, what that meant was, even if they don't win, they're still going to run Michael out of town. They're still going to make Michael into what they want him to be, which is, persona non grata.
Mm-hmm.
And that did happen.
Yeah.
Well, you've been in a lot of different criminal trials and watched the proceedings, and you hear about 70 sheriffs that raided the ranch, which they haven't even done for a serial murder case. Or just the extent to which they went, was the enactment of the trial and the 24/7 coverage of it, and it was just beyond any other person.
Those sheriffs, and it's not, and Tom Sneddon went in there too, by the way. What prosecutor goes with the sheriffs to do a search?
Oh, and Diane Diamond also had.
Diane Diamond was given the heads up. She's in the bushes, okay, filming.
God.
I mean, they were looking through that house like they were in Candyland. I had that footage too. The sheriffs that went onto the ranch, they thought they were in Candyland, and they weren't finding anything. They took all this stuff. They didn't find anything.
Right.
Sorry, I'm coughing.
That's okay.
I just get worked up. I get very worked up about this.
We do too. I think the thing that made me so angry while I was reading your book was hearing your descriptions about Tom Sneddon. I mean, he seemed so kind of like out of control. I mean, you said that his anger was just, everyone could see it. Even the judge, who was, leaning towards the side of wanting to see Michael guilty, even he had to say, calm it down, Tom Sneddon. He made some sarcastic remarks here and there, because Tom Sneddon he had an agenda, and I think even the juries started to pick up on that. Michael had been singing about Tom Sneddon for years before that, but I think people picked up on it, his anger.
No question that the jury picked up on the obsession that Tom Sneddon had with Michael, but I don't know if they understood that he was as pointedly presenting the evidence in such a way. And the reason is because Zonin handled it, and so did Auchincloss. They kind of took Sneddon away, and they that
was the prosecution team, right?
Right, exactly.
For everyone who needs to know.
Yeah. So there were 3 prosecutors on this case, which is unusual, right? And each one of them took turns, and over time, because again, 5 months went by, less Sneddon and more of the other prosecutors, because they could at least appear to have objectivity and be a prosecutor, not appear to be somebody with a vendetta who was angry and had a personal stake in Michael Jackson being destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, didn't they during the grand jury testimony, or with the magazine with Gavin, they found out he actually had Gavin handle the magazine and then had it fingerprinted after the fact, and then he tried to produce that as evidence in court. Is that correct? Or is that what the understanding?
He did. That is correct. But what's more odd about it is fingerprints can't be dated. I don't know if you realize that. Fingerprints, you don't get a date from a fingerprint. You can identify a person, but you can't say when they actually touched any given object. So if it's a gun, if the print is there, you don't know if they touched that gun, when they touched the gun. So, but what was interesting is that the magazine that Sneddon handed to Gavin Arvizo to try to frame Michael was dated after, like, let's say they were there in May of the year. The magazine was a magazine from August. Like it couldn't have even been in existence at Neverland at the time the Arvizos were there. So Sneddon made a little mistake there. He got caught.
Yikes. Yeah. Tampering with evidence. That's a pretty serious, for a prosecutor for that to come out. I'm surprised nothing happened with that.
Well, that's the thing. And again, this is why I got so angry and interested in doing this, because as time went on and I started to look at everything and go through the evidence, and I have pictures of those fingerprints and all the phone calls and all the rest of it that they were trying to allege was a conspiracy and was, that Michael had locked these people away and that he had done, those are things I wondered, why didn't the media ever point any of this out? Why? And again, we were steered to have to say a certain thing. I don't know about other people, but I was. I didn't have the option of saying whatever I felt like anyway. Okay. In other words, there's a pre-interview. I'm sure you guys realize that before anyone comes on TV, the producers pre-interview and say, "Oh, today we're going to talk about, Macaulay Culkin's testimony." And I say, or whomever. And I say, well, what about Macaulay Culkin? Because he says nothing happened. No, we don't want Macaulay Culkin. We want to talk about whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that happened.
Positive. They didn't want nothing positive.
No, that happened every day to me. Every day. I mean, there were things that I did want to say, okay? Like to compare Michael to Elvis and to tell people how great he was and to say that, that it was a big deal, that everybody in the world was there trying to get the interview and whatever. I was told, no, stay on target, stay on track. We're talking about so-and-so today. We don't want to hear about Macaulay Culkin. We already know that information.
Or Brett Barnes.
Right, exactly. So I don't know if people realize how slanted. I know they're seeing now the slant of the media because it's obvious, but I don't know if they realize that all that stuff is almost pre-scripted before people get on the news.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I'm trying to. I can't really remember after the non-guilty verdict was made. I'm trying to remember what the coverage was like during that time after the fact, because of course the media doesn't want to see that Michael Jackson was innocent. There's nothing to spin with that. But can you recall what it was like after Vindication Day and how the media, there was a lot of disappointment, a lot of people lost their book deals, their show deals, their movie deals, right? So what was that like?
Actually, I'll never forget that, because that was one of the things that really ate at me. Mm-hmm. As soon as the verdict came down, the media trucks and the amount of people on the road to Neverland, on Michael Jackson's road, was so long and so crazy. As a media person, I was able to drive by a lot of it and get up close enough. After that day, every satellite truck, every tent, every wire, every camera was ripped away, and they were all gone. I stayed. I was still there. And I saw it. And I thought, what? No one's going to do any follow-ups and ask anything or say anything? And instead what happened was Natalie Holloway had been missing in Aruba, and it was the next story.
Yeah. And
everybody ran to Aruba. And you never heard another word about Michael, except for some tabloids that were reporting that Michael Jackson had gone now to a different country and had another molestation accusation against. I don't know if you remember that. There were a couple of those too. Mm-hmm. In other words, the verdict didn't even count.
Mm-hmm. And those were just fabricated news. Yeah, there was nothing there. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I can't imagine. It's just amazing how after all of that, he went through hell. Nobody cared. It's just his life was ruined.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that was, that was the thing that got me so angry. That's the thing that got me thinking and saying, it took me months before I went back for that evidence, because I had to go home and kind of, I was living in LA at the time, and kind of digest what happened. What happened here?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when I wanted to write a book and I had gone through the evidence, and I think you guys know this, I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I had already 7 books under my belt, all of them bestsellers. And when I went and wrote out a proposal of the Michael Jackson conspiracy book, which would have been a positive and showing why he was found not guilty, the publishers in New York, every one of them said, we're not interested. And I went to one of my closest publishers, and I had a conversation about it. And she said to me, any pro-Jackson book is not going to be accepted by our company or by the public. So sorry. And I was just like, oh my God, this is proof. Yeah. And back then, self-publishing, especially for published authors, you didn't do that. It wasn't a thing 15 years ago. It wasn't even, it existed, but it was only for people who wanted to write vanity books. It wasn't for real quote unquote authors. And yet I found myself in the position of having to go to a self-publishing house and asking them to join forces with me to do this, because I wanted it to be a good book. I wanted it to be a hardcover book with the right cover and all of that, which it was originally. The original copies of it had a book jacket, had the raised lettering, had everything that I wanted it to be. I was willing to give away 50% of the book just to have it look right and be right. Which again, the thanks I got for that is just, well, you know what? At the end of the day, as Tom Mesereau said to me, with all the struggles I went through with this book, he said, there will come a day where you will be very happy that you've done this book, because I suffered and I gave up a lot, and I really thought I was destroying my own career as a journalist. And he gave me hope that if you tell the truth, you will come out on the right side of this. It will be good. And I guess he was right.
Yeah. Are you aware of any other trial, or I just feel like this was like beyond any other trial?
This was bigger.
Like with the smear campaign about.
Oh yeah, no. I don't know of any other trial that even comes close to Michael Jackson's trial.
Did Nancy Grace eat crow ever, or no?
Sorry?
Nancy Grace used to say, "I'll eat crow if he's found not guilty." And all of those people, and then at the end of the day, it's like, oh, well, it's his fame that's why. It's like, they were awestruck by his celebrity or whatever. And that's why he was not guilty. Mm-hmm. So you're here to say there's more to it.
I'm here to say that the media isn't all you think it is. And I think people have found out through social media that there's a lot of slanted reportage. People want to tell a story. They go with the story they already have in mind. And nobody ate any crow after Michael Jackson was exonerated. Nobody really even cared. They were like, oh, well, move on, moving on.
Wow.
So we heard on John Ziegler's podcast last July that you started watching the documentary that came out last year, but you saw what it was of you couldn't continue watching it because that's not really what what the Michael Jackson that you got to know in court. And
well, first of all, Wade Robson, is it Robson? He was the first witness for the defense. Remember, I was in court. I watched him testify and swear under oath, putting his hand on a Bible, that Michael Jackson never did anything to him. Mm-hmm. He was the first witness for the defense. He was Michael's biggest supporter. Mm-hmm. So for me to start watching a documentary where he's going to suddenly now be, because he tried suing the Jackson estate, because he thought he was going to get a job with the Michael Jackson traveling show, whatever it was, and he didn't get any of that. And suddenly he didn't get any money from the lawsuit either. I wonder what he got paid to do that HBO documentary. I know it wasn't zero, as you might want to claim.
Right.
HBO spends good money, and I'm sure they spent good money for this.
People don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you think they did it for free?
No.
And their families got paid. Again, I would bet my life on it.
Mm-hmm. And the prosecution seemed to be very aggressive with him. Like, they were really trying to make him say something that something happened at the trial in 2005 when they were cross-examining him, and he was getting upset. He was like, no, and it was just like they were very skilled, and there was no budging with his testimony at the time.
There was no budging, and you have to wonder, it wasn't only that he took an oath and swore to tell the truth, but that he was anxious to get up there and be the very first witness for the defense to defend Michael. What happened between 2005 and 2019? What happened? What happened was he didn't get the career he wanted. Michael died. He didn't get to be able to sue the estate for all the millions he wanted. And suddenly the story starts to change. And now people want me to watch that with, with a straight mind. No, I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen the documentary Square One that came out last year on Amazon Prime?
I have not seen that yet. I know you guys asked me about it.
Oh,
I tried. Is it good?
It is. It's interesting. Yeah, you should watch it. Absolutely.
Okay, well, I did a documentary with some producers from Berlin, which was a positive spin. I actually cooked them up with Ron Zonin so they could have the other sides as well. I didn't, I wanted to show people the real story.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think I saw that, but it's not been translated yet. I think we're still waiting the translation.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
Saw a live version of it, but we had to just watch it and guess what we were saying. But I remember seeing you there.
Yeah, and they wanted me to help them to get it translated into English, and I could help them perhaps get it on into a media format in this country if it was in English. But to have people start to translate film for free, I wouldn't even know who to go to.
But they were a German family, I think, or a Dutch family who had grown up with Michael, and it was a very. Nobody knew about it because they're, a family of integrity. They didn't go run into the press saying, look who we're friends with. And he spent a lot of time with them, with the children growing up. And now those children are our age. And, they were so incensed with leaving Neverland that they felt that they were going to break their silence, that honoring their private, relationship with Michael over the years, because they had to speak out. Is that what you think?
Yeah. Oh, no question about it. No, I mean, look at the Cassios, by the way. The Cassio family was there when the Avisos were there.
Yeah.
And that included, one of the daughters. All those kids were in the same room. There's just so many things that don't add up. That, and there's money in it for people who want to bash Michael. There's a lot of money in it still.
It is. He's still paying to this day, or he's a target to this day.
Yeah. He's still a target. And by the way, his kids are still a target. And I find that to be abominable. That they live really cloistered lives and they're not sure what to think. I just, I know people who know the kids and say that, Paris has started to at least come into her own a little bit. She's been doing some singing gigs here and there in Los Angeles, but that Blanket, I think I forget what he goes by now. Like
E.G. Yeah.
E.G., right? Yeah. He's, very withdrawn, and, we don't hear anything about Prince either, really. I mean, think what they're going through with all this.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's incredibly difficult. I wonder, since you brought up family, Michael's family was with him during the entire trial. I believe all of them were there. And you spoke a lot about Catherine, his mother, and how she was kind of like a rock during the whole experience. But could you tell us a little bit more about what you observed when you saw, I think Janet had to sit outside of the courtroom during some of it, and, Michael's father and the brother. What was that? I mean, you were always a fan of Michael, but did you know a lot about the family before that?
Of course I knew about the family because I grew up with the Jackson 5. So yeah, I know the family. What I can say is that the solidarity behind Michael from his family I thought spoke volumes, really, truly. You know, nobody was going, at one time, you do know that the sister, what's her name? I can't.
Maybe.
Latoya?
Right?
Latoya?
Latoya, thank you.
Latoya.
Latoya had actually made allegations against Michael, or had gone along with something, and then
Yeah.
she backtracked on it, and she also participated in the German film that I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she did. Guys, I need to sign off. We're about an hour in. I know we started late. I have another engagement.
No problem. We have one more question.
Sure.
One more. Okay. From your perspective, as someone who's worked in the media for decades now, do you think that there's a way to have the pendulum swing in the other direction for Michael? We know that there have been so many, there's been so much slanted media coverage of his life, the court trial. What kind of strategy do you think could even bring Michael back to restore his legacy and his reputation?
Well, I think.
Is it
that-
possible?
Is it possible? You know, people, perhaps with the new generations who are finding his music now, they will realize that this man was a genius. He was one of the most creative and talented artists of all time, and always will be. And and with social media now revealing the agendas that networks have, I think it's possible that the newer generations can start to see through this and understand that just because the media is reporting something doesn't mean it's actually true. So yeah, I have hope.
That's great. I mean, we're always looking for hope, and we're always looking for positivity, and we're always looking to learn. So we're just so grateful that you could take the time to speak with us on this Vindication Day anniversary. And for anyone who doesn't have the book, I'll just remind you again, the Kindle ebook is on sale for 99 cents, less than $1 for the next 24 hours. And you can pick that up. You don't need a Kindle to be able to read it. You can read it right from your laptop. And there's a 5-day sale for the soft cover version of the book for $9.99, and you can pick that up until June 17th. And we'll talk about that in the group. But for now, I just want to say thank you to Aphrodite Jones, and thank you for giving us your insight on this this special day that we continue to celebrate 11 years later.
Listen, I want to say, let's release doves every year on this day, because Michael should be celebrated. And thank you, you ladies should be celebrated as well. And I'm just so thrilled that Michael's fans are still out there in full force. I know he's looking down from heaven and smiling.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining. And
guys, I'm just signing off, okay?
all right, all right, bye-bye.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks.